project by the name of EC West, EC East, sorry. So as a work session, no decisions are made, no minutes are kept, but we are live streaming and recording the session. It's really essentially the equivalent of a community meeting for the commissioners. Commissioner Thayer had some personal business that popped up and would have certainly did want to be here. We've scheduled this a few times trying to get all the calendars together, but I would ask, use the microphone so folks in the room can hear, and it's also picked up for recording. And I guess with that, we'll just go around the table for introductions and then start. Chris Richardson, Board Chair.
Dal Schroeder, Commissioner.
I am Mark Denreader, Director of Community and Economic Development.
I'll introduce our team. Sorry. Jim Yates with Kraft Companies, and to my left is Susan Wade. Sorry, different Susan. Susan Wade with Redlands, and Claire Velda is our real estate legal counsel.
Thanks much. Do we have anything from staff to kick off? Or?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Jim, I'll turn it over to your team. I know we had met about a month or so ago, and the initial concept brief that we met over was a little just light on detail. We had location and gross numbers, but really wanted to hear a little bit more so we can provide guidance to staff and ideally to yourselves. So if you could, the floor is yours.
Okay, good. What I'm going to do is kind of go through the first few sets of slides here. Some of these first sets are somewhat repetitive, so we'll kind of just touch on those more briefly. I think you know the project location, some of the basics, and then we'll kind of get into more of the details of it. First slide here is our team. As I said before, Susan and Brian Hart's our engineer on record. Carolyn White with Brownstein is also with Claire's team here. Dave Takeda is our water engineer. Chris McGranahan, I think you guys know, as the traffic engineer who's used by the county on other projects as well as ours. As we go around, we have ERO Resources and our environmental. Diane Miller's our district legal counsel. Bruce Lytle is our water engineer of record. And Kathleen and Dale are our geotech surveyors. Again, this is kind of a standard thing for us, but it's our growth of how we plan things and plan impact and try to mitigate impacts over a longer period of time. Going through the conservation-minded communities and our water conservation, those concepts, and same with the community partnership. The entitlement process on this EC East, we started our side in 2020 and looking at the community and looking at where the economic development zone was layered in and some of the proximity of things there. Went through our water adjudication in late 2021 and 2022. You may know that this property, this master plan, is actually made up of two properties. One was owned by Steve Balcerovich and the other was owned by Estrel. So that's why you'll see a reference sometimes to north and south. The north and south within the water adjudication were those two separate properties in there. If you want to go to the next. Again, when we kind of shared this last time, the projects are in the kind of northwest corner of the county, if you will, which is generally where the growth has been directed from the comprehensive master plan. Kind of fits in along the yellow line there is the economic development zone, so just kind of following some of the footprint that had been put in place by the county previously. Also just touching on, and again, these are things that you know because the housing study was commissioned by the county, but just these are some of the pieces of information or data inputs that we utilize to try to identify, what makes sense to do where in the process. So we'll get into it further, but, the housing study is coming to, the conclusion that a variety of housing opportunities and things like that are necessary, and the diversity is necessary. And we're putting a plan together to, allow for that and allow for some flexibility over the next 30 years to bring in products as they evolve in the marketplace. Vicinity map, and I think some of the basic statistics, none of that has changed from last time, and that's, I think you're pretty familiar with that. It's almost 1,300 acres. Again, it's mixed use. It'll be phased over a long period of time. And then, regional infrastructure will be addressed from a master planning perspective, but then implemented as plats and phases are developed through the process. So with that, I'll let Susan, who's our land planner, kind of give you the color of how we go about this process and what the characteristics of the site are.
A little more detail on the site analysis. Planning always begins with identifying high points, low points, natural drainage ways. So here you see high points in red and low points in blue, and the natural drainage ways in kind of the squiggles. Our goal here, sorry, try not to yell, but thank you for letting me know. Good site design always tries to relate best to the land. For example, using existing drainage ways for detention and stormwater movement. As Jim had mentioned, the economic development zone follows Kiowa Bennett and County Road 178 on the north. So again, just to orient everyone, the site now is to the north, it's to the left, and south is to the right. So it's the best way for the site to fit on a slide. We'll be looking at the terrain, the access, detention, stormwater, and the EDZ zone. So this is the conceptual master plan. It's a little more detailed than we shared with you in our last meeting. Just to give a little overview, the green indicates open space. The yellow indicates residential uses. The red and plum color indicate potential commercial and industrial uses. Previously, when we came in, we showed 3 large villages. We have North Village, Central Village, and South Village. You'll see those are still intact. This is just providing a little bit more detail. We do want to utilize the EDZ zone along Kiowa Bennett. This is our best opportunity for visibility and access to future commercial uses. For the residential, we do want to cluster residential and surround it by open space. This too will be a conservation community with 50% or greater open space. This master plan really only indicates the intent of our overall design. We are still working through, final product and final tenants. The single family detached in yellow may also be duplexes, small lot, townhome, somewhat of a different product mix, going back to your housing assessment that said it was a lack of diversity in housing types. The retail along Kiowa Bennett really needs and wants high visibility. So at the intersection of County Road 174 and Kiowa Bennett, that's going to be a strong intersection connection with Kiowa Bennett being that truck route. It's really important for that access and visibility. All our future roads will meet county standards. There will be no exceptions to the road standards. Access off of Kiowa Bennett, we will need to make sure that we study that in the future to make sure that that circulation route along Kiowa Bennett is maintained for the truck route and larger cars. Arterials do, it's worth saying, arterials do have that third middle turn lane in all of the county standards. So So a little more detail on the central village. This gets into showing open space, parks, and trails in a little bit more detail. We are really trying to pay attention to edge conditions. We'll go into that a little bit further. But the intent is to create a meandering edge condition along the east, north, and south, as well as along Kiowa Bennett. The open space is pulled back from the overall property line, and open space corridors, following the natural landforms, are created to really reinforce that cluster neighborhood development. A little more detail. The village center and town green along Kiowa Bennett this most likely will be our phase 1 development. It's going to be a mix of commercial uses, really giving an opportunity for local retail, mix of housing types, as mentioned before, small lot, and possible 2 to 3 types of townhomes. We envision, senior services, healthcare, and fire protection possibly being located in this town square. It's a community gathering place, not just for residents of EC East, but the entire community. Here we're also illustrating on how future detention ponds might be utilized for different purposes. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a drainage basin, but possibly a higher tier might be a half soccer court or an open play lawn. Again, zooming in just a little bit more into the town square. This we really envision on being an overall community gathering place, an amenity center, possibly a food market, neighborhood services, and residential architecture, really activating that space and surrounding it with different uses. Kiowa Bennett, this goes back a little bit into our neighborly edges or community edges. We really see that we want to incorporate the edge condition properly for the uses to allow visibility for commercial uses while providing this rural landscape character. This oversized setback that we see along Kiowa Bennett may include drainage ways, it may include regional trail system, it may include life safety with XL and decel lanes. So we're providing that space for all of those uses. Again, these are character images just to give you an idea of what it may. I'm going to go back one. In the upper right-hand corner, we're really talking about this undulating edge. We don't see any one edge being consistent with any one use. So we would see, a parking lot might pull forward, a commercial use might pull back. It might have an undulating edge condition that provides a little bit more of a softer feel along Kiowa Bennett. Our target community services really begins with maybe age-targeted housing. It might be a senior facility, a independent or assisted living community. Health services are really top of our list. Possibly an urgent care might be needed in this area. Again, life safety issues, including fire and police stations, are an opportunity, as well as continuing education. We see in almost every community that we work with, adult education is a key factor. It may be a vocational school, it may be a tech school, it may be a healthcare, a nursing school. We are trying to target a veterinarian clinic on this property. We feel that could also provide some educational components with it. We've started conversations with some of these users and tenants. It might be a year in the making, but those are some of the vision that we see for community services. So I thought we would take this opportunity to discuss a little further about alleys. We're not committing to, or we're not committing not to, provide alley product, but I kind of wanted to use this time to maybe get your feedback and feelings on it. The benefit of an alley product is, well, first the definition of an alley product is the front door to the house is on the street or a green court, and the garage is on the opposite side. So that's an alley-loaded product. The garage would be accessed off the back. So that's the definition of an alley. The benefit of an alley-loaded product is it removes the garage and the apron, the driveway apron, from the street scene. It really enhances the street scene by really removing the car. On-street parking may occur, but it removes the car. We don't see this being heavily used product out here. I think that it would be minor in its use, but I wanted to make sure we were using a lot of the same terminology. So the lower left-hand image, really illustrates a 30-foot alley. A lot of the alleys you see in the Denver and surrounding suburban areas are 18 to 24 feet. They're very narrow architecture, sometimes 2, 3, 4-story architectures pulled right to the alley edge. That's not what we're envisioning out in Elbert County. This alley will really function as a second street, 30-foot wide, almost meets your local street standard. So the Elbert County local street standard is 32-foot travel lane or 34 flow line to flow line. So it almost functions as a secondary street. Again, this image illustrates single and 2-story elevations. It illustrates, a no apron condition on that first house, but then the next house has a full apron condition, if that makes sense. The 30-foot allows for large trucks. It allows for trash movement. There is no parking on alleys, so that will not be limited. It also improves life safety. Fire can be fought from both sides of the house. So the benefit of the product is the image on the street scene. We're just finding better ways to utilize that alley condition for future homeowners. I'm sure we'll have conversations on that. Oops, did I skip one? You want to go to reuse?
Yeah. So I think there's just a couple slides left.
Yeah, this is the end.
Okay.
For some reason, she didn't take that one out.
So again, and again, I think we walked through this last time, and the water system itself has not changed in the approach to it. But this is just a diagram that kind of depicts what we do at Independence and what we would continue to do here. Obviously, as technology improves and efficiencies improve, we'll integrate that into the new design, but it'll basically be the same concept that we're doing at Independence. And so then again, you guys know this. Next steps, we'll submit our application, go through the process, preliminary plat, and district service plans comparable to both Independence and EC West.
At the end.
That it? Mm-hmm. So just one kind of final comment on the alley product. The intent at the PUD level is just to kind of allow for some of these things to be evaluated. If we were going to do something like that, that would be on a plat. We would bring the plat in, and you would see our experience. The Denver type alleys are something you put up with for location. It's like I can be near downtown, but it's an inconvenience. The bigger, broader alleys really are, they snow plowing's easier, the maintenance management, all of that is easier. I think, as you know, we do all the maintenance internally.
Yeah.
We're still, I think, working with Bart on exactly who owns what, because that's something I think for the county you have to consider. Even though we're going to maintain it, who ultimately controls it, who ultimately makes decisions, those kinds of things. And so we're fine with wherever you guys land on that. We just need to get a landing spot and do that.
Yeah, on the more substantial alleyway concept, I understand that's not something you're wedded to or you just want to have allowed, but it seems like having lived in a community like that a long time ago up in Aurora, one very tight, broader is better, but 30 feet, this isn't something that would be intended to supplement traffic circulation, because it's almost road width, but not. So how is that managed in planning where?
It's really intended for access, so home access. It's not so much circulation. If you have several blocks in a row, theoretically, you could kind of hop from one to the other, but it's typically we'll button those off, leave some space for snow accumulation on one end of the alley. So it's not so much circulation as it is kind of how the houses fit and live on pushing people to the front. So we might do that where they'd be across the street from a park, and you would have, instead of having people being frustrated that their driveway's getting blocked because people are parking at the park. So it's going to be a little bit more specific application, but we didn't want to just eliminate the opportunity if it didn't make sense at this point in the process.
And one thing to add, I always like to use alleys as another step in the hierarchy. So you have arterials, you have collectors, you have locals, and the alley is just one more step in that kind of journey down. It is really just for the homeowner to get in and out of their garage. So it improves the street scene, and really it's only used for the homeowner or the people that live on that alley.
Okay, yeah, just historically, we've got some older unincorporated communities where alleys have become the streets, and we're struggling mightily with stormwater and access and having room to maintain and et cetera.
Icing in the winter and all of, yeah. And you know, typically when they're narrow, they don't get a lot of sunlight in them, and that's our main snow removal mechanism in Colorado.
So on the alley concept, is that, it looked like the picture was more for a multi-structure. It was what the picture was, but would these be intended for single family as well, or more for what you look on the townhome side?
Single family detached is probably the most likely use for us. There could be some townhome application, especially when they're clustered, and I wouldn't necessarily call it an alley, but there would be like a little access drive to them that would fit that alley standard for townhomes. So it would be both.
So same idea though, the access from the back.
Yes, correct.
Well, the session is really, it's open to the public, but not for public comment. So, but I guess if we could back up more to the macro level, this is by far the largest community that's been proposed in the county, and I know you're envisioning a lengthy build-out time period. Could you kind of walk through what you're looking at for phasing? I mean, and not when would you start, but really what's reasonable with rates of absorption and need. I know we asked last time, and I'm glad you've at least acknowledged in the presentation the housing needs assessment, where I know there's a lot of value in developing large, expensive single-family homes, but that's not necessarily what we need, and that's a struggle throughout the state of how do you present a product that people can actually afford before they get to mid-career or retirement.
Right. So when you look at this, the overall plan, the Central Village basically coming in at 174, crossing Kiowa Bennett going east into the community, that would be right now what we think our first phase would be. There is a fair amount of alternative non-residential space there, all the red colored, and that would most likely not develop early on. Most of those uses are going to want rooftops. We are talking to a couple of education systems, a couple of colleges that have equestrian needs, I'll say, and so that might be something you could do early that you don't have to rely on the rooftops necessarily to support it, but they certainly would rely on the community around for large animal equestrian use. And so we would come in with what is C1 up there, that area, and then the kind of the round circle, that would be the community gathering space. We would lead with that and build those out ahead, and then start, as you go east, build those houses. You know, I think realistically, you're looking at 80 to 100 homes a year once you ramp up in production, so you can kind of, you know, look at the math. It's 20 plus year build out. It is not a come in and build, you know, 1,000 homes a year for 3 years. The non-residential will then continue to follow. I don't think we pointed out, but we do have 2 school sites. So just to clarify the earlier comment, in the town center where we're looking at alternative, call it adult education, that's not to conflict with our traditional school, you know, K through 12, whatever the school district ultimately wants. We'll have sites for them, we'll build schools, we'll do the things that any community would do. This is really an opportunity kind of in the town center area to utilize our kind of main community building for education of various types. I think there's opportunities for technology and for healthcare and things like that most of the schools are looking for places to host. When they do online, they still need to gather at times for things, and that's what we would work with them on. So I don't know if that answered your question in phasing, but it
gives me
we're going
at
to
least
try
a
to build
feel
a
of
sense of
timing,
place
'cause,
on a smaller scale, and then it will grow and kind of go out from there. The non-residential is the hardest one to gauge because we just don't know the tenants and the types but we've been pretty active
Understood.
with that.
And, yeah, I guess kind of the genesis there. I know there's other substantial projects that have been proposed as well, so just trying to get our head wrapped around what is the rate countywide that we would expect to be able to support a build-out. I mean, if it's 80 to 100
And you
at
could probably
5 substantial
times a couple of
projects,
them, right.
there-
Yeah.
that's
Right.
a lot of influx
Yeah.
in a year for this county, so.
Yeah.
My eyes are going bad. So is it a purple at the bottom right? What is that? I missed that somewhere.
Sure. The plum color is potential commercial
That's
or industrial.
Okay.
So we think that intersection of County Road 166 and Kiowa Bennett may be a good intersection for higher, you know, either light or heavy industrial uses.
Including we've been working with Postal Service to have a post office in there. So it'll be things like that as opposed to maybe more purely retail. Retail will be, and again, it's not that black and white, but it'll be a little bit more customer-centric, and the purple's more job-centric, I would say.
Yeah, you're kind of targeting things that would bring in more than just retail jobs, which is,
Yeah, the rooftops, even though the numbers sound like a lot of all the projects, still would not support huge amounts of retail. I think it's going to be convenience, local neighborhood retail, and things like that. But I do think there are some job creators that could do well in this environment, and it's a, you know, more affordable place. Their issue would be employees and housing, and that kind of comes with the package.
Are the school sites you mentioned identified on there, or?
The one school site we've proposed is in the southeast corner. It's a 15-acre school site along 166. It's the really light triangle in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay.
And then any other educational components might be in that village center, as Jim had mentioned.
So I assume you're working with the school districts and the fire and all that to get everybody on track where we're at?
We are, and we've, again, at this point in the process, and in being far out in both East and West, the fire districts have existing facilities. So we will either pay an impact fee and help them enhance and expand those existing so they don't pull out of an existing community, or build new, or some combination of both. And so we're just in those conversations right now. The school district, there are two different school districts, and EC West is Elizabeth, and this one's Kiowa in there.
Yeah, just please keep those conversations alive, because there's really, I mean, other local, I know the land use piece is here, but there's a lot of different local governments involved in supporting eventual citizens, as well as maintaining services to the current residents. So.
Yeah, we absolutely need those services for these communities, so we agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do appreciate, I guess, the discussion of the soft edge. I mean, when you look at it on the map, it kind of feels like you're from 166 to 174, you're driving past kind of a monolithic set of stuff. And I know there's some open space indicated, but I think as the design work continues, the more we can just...
Yeah, all of those planning areas don't, and this is probably a better look where you can see it.
Yeah.
It varies the offset. The planning areas are just boxes that don't necessarily get filled edge to edge, but in that area are those types of uses. And so I think we'll continue to work with, Mark and his staff and the county on how each of those, there's about 4 different segments as you go. From the left side is kind of more gathering community assets, the kind of pink color, the top left side, that's all targeted to be some type of senior housing. And that doesn't mean it's all restricted, and it doesn't mean it's a senior center, but just, whether that's patio homes or, any of those service providers that'll come in. Then as you kind of move into the center where the green square is, there'll be facilities and more like food and those kinds of options around there. As you move further to the right, which would be south, a little bit more of the big box, like a grocery store, maybe a Murdoch, something like that. And then continuing even further is where like the equestrian facilities. So they kind of fit together, but they each have their own little sub-neighborhood in there.
It feeds into that kind of clustering of neighborhoods. This is sort of clustering of development, right? So you have different clusters of commercial, residential, commercial, industrial. So not any one thing is overriding. You mentioned Aurora, where a community could be, 3,000 single-family homes, right? So I think that idea of smaller clusters of whatever it is a better way and a little more soft and sensitive to the land.
Well, I appreciate the emphasis on the, I'm trying to be politically correct here, for older folks' places to live. That's where our county's an older county anyway, and as our population ages, I think that's a good thing that we have added in there, that you're aware of that, and so I do appreciate that part.
Even just providing ranch homes with main floor masters, right? So that maybe a for sale small lot, right? Maybe not a facility that you're moving into yet, but the ability to sort of age in place.
How many access points are shown here on the different county roads in Kiowa Bennett?
Sure. So the main intersection would be 174 in Kiowa Bennett, which you can see right there at the main intersection. We have proposed 5 intersections between that 174 and 166 currently. We haven't gone through all the traffic studies and traffic reports. Some might be eliminated, some might be a right in, right out. So the idea is to, what's the minimum number of intersections that we can provide to make sure we have adequate access and not slow traffic. So we understand that there's a kind of a tug and pull on that. We want to make sure that there's adequate access in and out of commercial uses, right? People stop using it if you can't get in and out. So those are 2 in my mind easily. And then maybe another 2, one into residential and then possibly 1 into the industrial. So minimum of 4. Currently, we're illustrating 5. So those are all things that, again, this is a design intent.
Yeah.
It's not a complete
Sure, I understand.
thought-out plan, but we do know that that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Another reason why we did not also encourage the involvement of the EDZ zone on the bend of Kiowa Bennett, 178, is we're thinking that the true bends of Kiowa Bennett are already a traffic calming device, if you like it or not. And so we've really limited our access on that street just to 1. We have not proposed any commercial uses on that. Again, I think truck access, a lot of automobile access there could just cause more stress. So we're kind of focusing down on that Kiowa Bennett.
Yeah, I think that's going to, I guess, I know it's looked at, but I mean, even the state is beginning to recognize the Elbert Road in Kiowa Bennett as almost pseudo-state highway with connectivity between 24 and 70. So, and certainly we know we see the traffic load on it. So,
But those studies will show if there needs to be acceleration lanes, turn lanes, all that sort of stuff. That's what's
Absolutely.
involved.
Yeah, and again, we kind of listed off Chris McGranahan earlier, but he's not only working on this, but I think he worked with the county on their master traffic plan, and he's also working on a number of other projects in the area. So the good news is he has most of that data and can kind of integrate that in together, not only at build out, but kind of the phasing of what needs to happen early and what's needs to happen as we go forward.
I'm sure it's a tough thing to balance between safety, access, and those that are just passing by, probably not make anybody happy, but trying to find that happy balance as close as possible.
Does Black Hills have anything out here? Are you envisioning extending natural gas or primarily electric, or is that too far down the road right now?
We haven't made that determination yet, but getting Black Hills to do anything is a challenge. So they'll have to extend their infrastructure, not just pipes, but also rake stations and things like that. And so we'll sit down and work with them on what that looks like. At this point, we have not made a determination to go all electric. I think there's been some kind of state initiatives and certainly some federal pushes to do that. I think we're still fairly traditional, so we'll hang on to it as long as we can, but that may not be in our control.
I appreciate, yeah.
I assume the open trails and everything will be open to all county residents, not just residents of the development.
Correct. Yeah, we're kind of the same program in that regard, and we're continuing to work with Elizabeth Park and Rec and a couple other organizations on how we try to connect some of these trail systems, make them regional, but definitely within the community we will.
You had mentioned an equestrian-centered business opportunity earlier. Is there some thought to, equestrian trails or bridle path type work, or?
Yeah, I don't know if this site is as conducive for that as the EC West in there. We're absolutely open to that. The veterinary kind of center or equestrian center really is more geared towards health and rehabilitation for the animals as opposed to a riding facility.
Okay.
But as things evolve with those conversations, we're very happy to broaden that.
Understand that's other businesses, business decisions as well, so. Not important to the concept, I guess, but if and when built, have you put some thought into naming what this community is beyond DC East? Or, I mean, it just seems industrial and.
It will not be EC West or EC East.
Okay.
Yes, we have put thought into that, and we've been working on that, but have not
Yeah.
released that to the public
All right.
yet.
Okay. I mean, again, it doesn't impact the concept, but
No,
I
right.
think
Yeah.
it colors how people look at
Yes.
proposals.
When we get to the point of marketing and selling, there's some really good thoughts and ideas of how we embrace kind of prairie life and bringing those elements all together in that. Mhm.
Thank you. Well, no, so do appreciate I mean, it's this is a lot more concrete than what we
Yes.
saw a few months ago, which is appreciated, because that did kind of leave us with, something may happen here, but
Right.
wasn't sure what, so, okay.
And it is a very iterative process, right? We're trying to get some input and then put some lines in the sand, if you will, and then, so this will obviously continue to evolve, and the different little planning areas that you see will then start to have specific roads and uses to them, and so we'll continue to update you, obviously, through the process as we go forward.
Yeah,
And similar to the next steps slide that we had up earlier, we'll be working on PUD development standards to make sure 50% open space is applied. We'll then go into a preliminary plat to show how the PUD is being executed, and that's where you're going to see even more detail. So each step of the way, we commit to things that show you a little bit more detail.
appreciate that. No, since you mentioned you adjudicated water for the properties, I'm assuming you are the owner of the surface
Correct.
property, yeah?
Yes.
And then I think, as you look at moving forward, and I think through Mark and working with the county attorney, again, to me, if we're embarking on something this large, it's very important that we don't outpace our ability to provide services. So the phasing and timing and when we potentially release authorities to build, I know there's a tremendous struggle in the amount of time it takes to walk through to entitlement and ready to build versus market cycles, and when people need and can be buying homes is often out of sync. But I just don't want to see us get ahead of our skis on
Right.
there. I mean, we saw that really, I think, in the Elkhorn community where everything was paved and half of it wasn't built for a decade or more, and by the time the homes went in, the roads weren't exercised by anything other than kids learning how to drive, and it's become an issue in maintenance just because they really lost all elasticity, and once you then put traffic on it, they start falling apart. So, not putting infrastructure in before it's needed, but.
Yeah, we're definitely on board with phasing, and we have to balance that, like I said, with secondary access points and some various things like that. But I think we have a pretty good approach to it, where until a builder commits to certain bite of the apple, then we don't develop it and get out ahead of it. All the development you see in Independence was sold last year to builders. So all of those lots have been sold not to homeowners, but to somebody who's going to sell them to homeowners. And so that helps us not get too far out. And some of that's working with you on the timing of off-site improvements and infrastructure, things like that. And so
that kind of brings us back into the other local entities. I mean, we'll certainly look at roads, we look at water consumption, just about all the other services, other than law enforcement, are provided here. But those schools, fire, ambulance support definitely need to be.
Yeah, on that note, if I
Everyone
may,
needs to be comfortable with it. Mark?
Mr. Chair, thanks. You know, schools, fire, they've been mentioned, and land dedication, is that in place for fire in addition to schools?
So we have land identified. Obviously, there hasn't been any dedication because we haven't gone through the process.
Yeah.
That would be up to them. And so there's kind of a fork in the road of, do you want land or do you want additional, like, fee in lieu to build, expand on what you have existing? And that's, at this point, that's been completely in their court as to what they would prefer.
Okay, and then touching on phasing just a bit here, just in terms of the first homes built, once you get started, what year would that be, do you anticipate? Like how many years in until you see a house?
So it's probably 2 years of entitlement, a year of facilities, and a year of land development. So I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years out, 3 to 4 years out.
Thank you.
The general geography, does it lend itself? I mean, I'm trying to drive past it a lot, but you don't really pay attention to the elevation changes. But it does support adequate water flow without, or would you anticipate towers or surface tanks adequate?
This site does not have as much topography, but again, you can see, the red spots are the high points and the low. And so we'll have, our wastewater facilities in the low area, which is closer to Kiowa Bennett and 174, roughly down in that area, that things will flow down to, and then water will be a pressurized system, so we will have a tank, but it doesn't have to be like an elevated tank up on a hill as much as kind of in the old days.
On the north end, the North Village, if you connect those 3 red stars, that's a ridge line. The Central Village, the high point is actually on that east property line, so that the Central Village really all slopes towards the west. And then on the south, there's the 5 asterisks in there. There's multiple little ridges that all connect within that. But for the most part, there's a general ridge that goes from north to south.
I think that covers it for now.
And I appreciate you coming back in. I know, I'm sure we'll have some questions we'll get through staff after we've digested a little, and I know Grant had wanted to make sure we did get this recorded so he could watch as well. I'm sure he'll have some things. Do you have any, I guess, final comments or questions or asks? I guess I have one. While we were talking timing of things, as applications work through, if there's, I know there's a Metro District component of this that you're envisioning, that those be aligned with the actual applications in a way that we're not asked to look at financials before we know what the project really is, or, I mean, ideally, they're synced in time enough that we know what the funding is for. We're not being asked to pre-approve funding mechanisms without knowing what they support, or we're being asked to approve concepts without knowing if they're financially feasible. So, and if there's a several-year glide path here, I know there, you know,
Right.
the Tabor election, there's a one time each year where it makes sense to take something forward. So if, as you work through the application process, if that can be part of your kind of calculus on how everything comes together, I think that's tremendously useful for us. So we're not
Okay.
trying to disconnect economic feasibility from whether it's a suitable project.
Yeah, we will, bring this through this fall and into next year. The election cycle, as you know, it goes through. If it gets approved by the county, then it go into an election, which for the landowners, but then it's going to get certified by a judge. That will happen most likely a year from November, or next November, at that election cycle.
Okay, thanks.
But you will see the details of it long before that.
Anything final then? I'm sorry, I threw that one last at you when we were wrapping up.
Nope. No, we appreciate the time. We will continue to update you if you have questions, or if Grant has questions, whatever the appropriate channel, you can funnel them through Mark, and we'll, respond to those and continue through the process.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it much. Thank you.